Hey everybody. As we continue to reflect upon the corporal and spiritual works of mercy, I thought it would be important to take a few moments and talk with you about the sentiments or the inner dispositions that go behind the outward acts that we perform, to sort of look at what would be the soul to the body of the works of mercy that we do. What is it that motivates and makes those and gives those works their deepest meaning and their greatest purpose? I suppose the best place to go to give us an example of what we're looking for is Jesus. He always sort of sets the standard for us. And if you go to the scriptures and are attentive to mercy in Jesus' life, you begin to see how mercy sort of holds together, weaves together, gives shape to his entire ministry. The things that he says, the things that he teaches, the way that he acts are so often moved by a form of mercy. We see him having pity. We see him having compassion. He has compassion on the leper who comes to him looking for healing, compassion on the widow of Nain who has lost her son. We see him having compassion on the crowd before he feeds them with the multiplication of loaves and fish. Even compassion makes its way into the preeminent parable about mercy, the parable of the prodigal son. We're told that when the father sees his son returning, he has compassion and he runs to him and hugs him. It's inspired by compassion. Unfortunately, in English, the word compassion doesn't quite capture what the original languages were trying to communicate. For us, compassion seems kind of soft and sentimental and lovely, but in the original languages, the idea was that when you had a compassionate response to something, it involved, if you will, the guts, your bowels. It was a visceral response to something. Something very, very powerful that just sort of rose up within you. Maybe like deep, heartfelt emotion would be another way of putting it. But it's that sort of thing that when it happens, when it comes up within you, you're compelled to respond. You have no choice but to respond. And that's what we see Jesus experiencing. When the man comes to him looking to be cured of leprosy, he has a deep, visceral response to that and has to respond. It compels him to respond. That's where we hope our acts of mercy come from. Years ago, I had lunch with a friend from high school. His name was Bill, and I hadn't seen Bill in years. We had found each other on Facebook and reconnected, and so we decided we'd go to lunch, and so we did that. So we were out having lunch, and we were just chatting away, and Bill started to tell me about a news story from that morning. A van had been in a car accident, and three young children, had been killed. And as Bill was telling me that story, he started to get choked up. He himself was a father. And he went from being choked up to really not even being able to speak. He just had tears running down his face. He didn't know the family, but his compassion was such, his gut response, his deep heartfelt emotion was such that it just caused that reaction out of him. That's a compassionate response. It goes far beyond the sort of culturally accepted and expected experience of, oh, I'm so sorry, oh, that's so terrible, to being an experience of, I have to respond. It's not just recognizing the fact that the other person is suffering, but sharing in that suffering, entering into that suffering. Their suffering becomes your suffering, a deep, visceral response. Of course, that's where we hope our acts of mercy flow out of, that we are responding to others in their deep need with a deep, heartfelt, emotional, visceral response to them as Christ did. However, I don't know about you, but I'm not Jesus, and sometimes it doesn't work quite that way for me. There are moments when I go and do acts of mercy, even though I might not exactly feel like it. The story I tell is I can be working away in my office, doing email, taking phone calls. I got a full calendar of appointments to be had, too much stuff for one person to take care of, a lot like you guys, just endless things to do, when suddenly, unexpectedly, the phone call comes in. Hi, Father, my 98-year-old grandmother is dying. Can you come give her last rites? Of course I go, but the inner voice inside of me says, 98 years and she can't wait another day? It's ridiculous, but that's the response that I sometimes have. Am I proud of that? No, but it's real. And so I go, always, sometimes begrudgingly because I've got so much to do. Other times I go because, well, it's my job and who else is going to do it? And so off I go to do it. And the amazing part is, though, that every single time, no matter why I go, when I get there, when I'm in the actual situation, I forget everything else. And there is a very heartfelt, deep emotional response to this person and their family in their moment of need. By God's grace, when I enter this situation, I become the person I wish I always was. I have the feeling, the reaction I wish I had sitting back in my office when the phone rang. I really do think that even though sometimes we might not be motivated by exactly Christ-like compassion, by acting as we know we should, we can act our ways into a new way of being. We put ourselves in a place where we're open to God's grace, and our heart can be formed to be more merciful. And that's a remarkable thing. Because when we have a visceral response, a deep, heartfelt, emotive response to someone in need, whether it's children in a van who are in a car accident, or a 98-year-old woman who is dying, or feeding people at the food shelter. When we have that kind of response, if we don't act on it, we deny those individuals something that rightly belongs to them. Their condition has brought up out of us that emotional response. They rightly deserve to receive whatever response that brings to them. And on the other hand, if we don't act on that deep, compassionate response, that visceral response within us, we also cheat ourselves of being human, because that deep, emotional response, when it's genuine, is the best human response to deep love or deep sorrow. We make ourselves less human when we're not compassionate in that way. Paul, in his letter to the Romans, chapter 12, verse 9, says, "Let your love be genuine." Doing acts of mercy can help us be much more genuine in our love, so that additional acts of mercy can flow from a place of true Christ-like compassion.